So, folks, we've officially made it the end of WrestleMania weekend. WrestleMania 40 has come and gone. There were big gay brunches, supercards of honor, and, of course, one major clusterfuck to close out Saturday night. And initially, this video was just going to be a general recap of the weekend. You know, what events you need to check out, what matches you may want to go back and revisit, and my general thoughts on what went down. But the more the weekend went on and the more things I watched, one phrase kept coming back to me. And no, it wasn't about Cody Rhodes finishing his story. No, instead it was the fact that everyone kept driving home one simple fact about WrestleMania 40, that it was a reset for the company and the beginning of the Paul Levesque era. And today, we're going to talk about that. So there have been quite a few different eras throughout the history of professional wrestling. I mean, you had Hulk Hogan's golden era, which was defined by professional wrestling's ascent into popular culture, and of course, pro wrestler going from quite simply just another athlete into almost like a superhero within the public eye. Then later on, you had the Attitude Era, defined by edgy counterculture programming and the ascent of stars like Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock. And then, of course, you had the PG era, which was defined by polishing off the program into a nice, safe, kid-friendly, almost cartoon-like product that was safe for advertisers to slap their companies onto. And now we find ourselves in the Paul Levesque era. The only question I have is, what exactly is the Paul Levesque era? Oh, fuck! I love Cody. That shit's so fucking stupid. Look at that dumbass. Look at this fucking megalomania ass bitch. And honestly, this era is kind of interesting to look at, because when you look at any art movement or any type of era within any type of popular culture, it always seems to be kind of a response to the previous era. In the case of professional wrestling, the Attitude Era's grungy, edgy presentation was a direct response to the new generation's flashy, colorful presentation. Or you had the Reality Era, where of course more of the storylines were based in reality. That was a direct response to the PG era's more cartoon-like presentation. Every single era almost seems to be a response and rebellion against the era that came before it, but it doesn't seem that way with the Paul Levesque era. To me, it almost seems like an amalgamation of literally everything that came before it. I mean, you've got the kayfabe-breaking, line-blurring storylines of the Attitude Era. You've got the focus on great in-ring competition like you had during Ruthless Aggression, and the big fight field main events like you had during the Golden Era. And if WrestleMania is any indicator, you also have all of the advertisers like you had during the PG era. And also the corporate wide company lawsuit incriminating Vince McMahon like you had in the New Generation era. So I guess we really had all our bases covered here. Basically, it seems a lot less like the traditional ebb and flow like you have with art styles, and more of a concentrated, focused effort from the part of the WWE team, taking bits and pieces, what works the most out of each individual era of the company, and blending them all together to create this beautiful amalgamation of all of the best parts of the WWE in one specific era. But is that really all the Paul Levesque era is? Just an amalgamation of Frankenstein's monster of all of the best parts of previous WWE? Is there no innovation? Is there no creativity? Is this all it's going to be? Well, no. Because WWE doesn't just respond to itself, it also responds to pop culture and culture as a whole. Usually about 5 years too late, to be honest with you. I mean, the gritty, grungy Attitude Era fits in perfectly with the early 90s grunge era, but during the early 90s, they were doing the flashy, bright New Generation era, which would have fit in with like the mid-80s MTV. So if you really want to find the direction WWE's heading in, look like 5 years ago. And 5 years ago in pop culture, what was dominating the scene? The MCU. Now look, I've already, and I'm sure a lot of other YouTubers actually have already done plenty of comparisons of the Bloodline saga to the MCU. I mean, I did an entire video last year comparing how I thought Roman's reign needed to end using the MCU as my example. Hell, Roman Reigns has put the word cinema into the pro wrestling fans' common vernacular. In fact, I'd argue if Paul Levesque didn't want his name attached to this specific era, I would call this the cinematic era more than anything else. We're moving into an era based on interconnected, splicing storylines and interesting, multifaceted characters. An era that's relying on the fan to know the connections between all of the characters, to know all of the histories inherent within. I mean, one of my favorite moments throughout all of WrestleMania was just one simple moment. And it's right before Sami Zayn went out to face Gunther for the Intercontinental Championship. And right before he hits the curtain, Kevin Owens is waiting for him. And Kevin Owens is on a completely different show. He has had nothing to do with this storyline. There's no reason in old WWE that he should have been there. But we all know the relationship between Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens. We all know their history, and so therefore it just added that one extra bit of oomph as Sami went out for that matchup. As silly as it sounds, an era that is kicked off by somebody finishing their story is going to be based entirely around that. Stories, telling intriguing stories and crafting great mythos within the world of professional wrestling, something that honestly WWE has struggled with for the past 2 decades, priding themselves on making moments instead of telling stories, priding themselves on creating professional wrestling storylines that involved bizarre twists and turns that didn't really fit the narrative, but they didn't care, because they didn't really care what the fans thought at the end of the day. But the fact of the matter is that burns people out. I mean, I know a ton of people who were very close friends of mine, still are, who last year after Cody lost against Roman, kind of fell off of WWE because it didn't feel like there was a plan moving forward. It didn't feel like the satisfying story they were expecting was being told. Now, luckily, they've got the train back on track this year and things seem to be going in the right direction, but those unnecessary twists and turns that WWE has been known for throwing in the past, those Russo-esque twists, brother, unfortunately just burn people out. In my opinion, I think it's a lot better to just tell the story, intriguing stories, get people invested, and finish the story. And trust that your fans will join you next week to make sure they get on the train for the next story. And it's not just WWE moving into this mindset. I mean, AEW kind of wrote the blueprint for this entire era, crafting intriguing stories like the Hangman Kenny Omega saga, or of course MJF versus CM Punk. They kind of were the ones who were the spark for this entire movement within the world of professional wrestling. And even in independent wrestling, a world that honestly, it's kind of hard to tell these long-term booking stories with, are still managing to flourish, using social media and other aspects to push their storylines along. I mean, Effie and Mance Warner are already in contention for a feud of the year with what they're doing in GCW, and it's all because of their dedication to the story, their dedication to the craft, and their dedication to making it feel as real as possible. And it doesn't even have to be these long-term, crazy, drawn-out storylines either. Sometimes it can quite simply just be the story of the match itself. Hell, my favorite match throughout all of the collective was Effie and Alley Catch versus Tyler Breeze and Fandango. Bussy versus Dirty Breeze. Because the story was simple and written out for them right there. It was the proverbial prom king and queen of the big gay brunch going up against 2 outsiders with one goal in mind: to make them gay. And holy shit, it was amazing. It had all of the goofy Looney Tunes bullshittery that could come along with it. It even had Dirty Breeze turning the tables and trying to turn Allie straight. It was fucking hilarious. And it came 12 hours or so after Effie and Mansoor tore the house down with their I Quit match at Joey Janela's spring break. A match, once again, based in story, based in the histories that they had, and based in the fact that Effie was forced to quit after Mansoor threatened Ali. It wasn't Effie's concern for himself that forced him to lose. It was his concern for Ali Catch. It was a beautifully emotional moment to cap off their feud, which is more than likely still going, and I cannot wait for it to reach its crescendo, because fucking story is king in the world of professional wrestling. Pro wrestling is honestly in a very, very exciting place right now. I mean, everyone at every table is eating good right now. WWE just had 2 amazing title reigns ended by guys who can definitely carry the company into this next era. AEW just signed the likes of Mercedes Moné, Will Ospreay, Kazuchika fucking Okada, and independent wrestling is thriving up and down every single coast. Professional wrestling is fucking back. And yet some of y'all motherfuckers will still find a way to complain about it on Twitter. But to be honest with you, a whole lot of this, in my opinion, comes from the fact that for the first time in a long time, it feels like professional wrestling companies are trusting us. They're trusting fans. They're trusting us to do our jobs, and that's be fans of professional wrestling, to know the history, to know the lore, and to ask questions when we don't. They don't have to handhold us and say things like, well, Roman Reigns attacked Seth Rollins at the end of that match because he's obsessed with Seth's betrayal of the Shield, and that means more to him than the title or anything, and they don't have to explain all of that because we're wrestling fans, and we know that shit. They don't have to give us 50 different video packages on Kazuchika Okada or Katsuyori Shibata because we're wrestling fans, and we know that shit. And they don't have to look at us and say that Cody Rhodes is most certainly the man to lead the WWE into this next era, because we're wrestling fans, and we know that shit. So there it is, my little state of professional wrestling address, my thoughts on the Paul Levesque / cinematic era. But what do you think? What defines this era for you? Also, do you like the name cinematic era? Let's get it going, folks. Put it in the comments. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Just do the YouTube people stuff. Let me know what you thought about the weekend. What was your favorite match? Obviously, Dirty Breeze and Bussy took my heart. Sami and Gunther was fucking amazing. The clusterfuck was... holy shit, is it still back? Is it still going back there? Hold on, yeah. This shit's fucking insane. We're only like, I think like 30 minutes into a 2-hour fucking match. Holy shit, that match was insane. So let me know what your match of the weekend was down below. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, donate to the Patreon. Just do the YouTube people stuff. You know what to do. And of course, always remember, y'all, that when you're a fight boy, well, you're a fight boy for life.